The skillet is smaller now. The pot that fed 12 sits in the back of the cabinet, replaced by the one that holds just enough for a bowl and maybe tomorrow's lunch. But the hands still remember. Here are 30 African American comfort foods that seniors living alone still make when the house gets quiet. Salmon croquettes made from a can of pink salmon were the meal that asked almost nothing and gave back everything. In black kitchens from the 1940s onward, a single tin, a couple of eggs, crumbled saltines, and a diced onion could produce a plate of golden patties in under 20 minutes. You drained the salmon, picked through it for bones with your fingers, mixed it together without measuring a thing. The patties went into a skillet with just enough oil to cover the bottom, pressed flat with the back of a fork. The edges crisp first, turning deep amber while the center stayed soft. During the Great Migration, canned salmon became a pantry anchor for families moving into northern cities where fresh fish was expensive and unfamiliar. For a senior cooking alone, 2 or 3 patties next to some rice or grits, maybe a slice of bread to soak up the oil, that was dinner. You made them with your eyes closed because your mother made them the same way and hers before that. Before there were bone broth trends, black grandmothers were already sipping potlikker from a coffee cup while standing at the stove. Potlikker, the dark mineral-rich broth left behind after simmering greens for hours, was never thrown out. It held everything the collards or mustard greens had given up, along with the smoky depth of whatever pork seasoned the pot. Jackie Torrance, the African-American storyteller from North Carolina, remembered her grandmother making potlikker from mustard greens, pinto beans, and potatoes, treating it like gravy poured over cornbread. Through the 1950s and 60s, elders used it as folk medicine. Warm potlikker eased earaches and settled stomachs. For a woman alone, a cup of potlikker was the simplest comfort there was. She had already cooked the greens. The broth was just sitting there. She poured it into the same cup she used for morning coffee, sat at the table and drank something that tasted like every Sunday she ever cooked for people who were no longer there to eat. The smell of stewed tomatoes and okra could fill a small apartment in minutes, and for seniors living alone, that mattered. It made the kitchen smell like somebody was still home. This combination traces directly to West Africa, where okra thickened soups long before it crossed the Atlantic in the holds of slave ships. Enslaved Africans in the South continued cooking okra with tomatoes as a one-pot meal, and it survived because it needed almost nothing. A can of tomatoes, a handful of okra, onion, salt, pepper. Some added a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. Others dropped in bacon for richness. Spooned over white rice, it became dinner from ingredients costing less than $1 even into the 1970s. The okra broke down slowly, thickening the broth into something silky and warm. You stood at the stove and stirred, and the apartment filled up with the smell of something old and familiar, and the quiet didn't press so hard for a while. Nobody talked about eating sardines on crackers. You just did it. A tin of sardines, a sleeve of saltines, a bottle of Louisiana hot sauce, and maybe a slice of raw onion if there was one. That was a meal requiring no cooking, no cleanup, and no audience. In black households from the 1940s through the 80s, canned sardines were one of the cheapest proteins you could keep on a shelf, sitting in the pantry for months until the day nothing else sounded right. The little fish came packed tight in oil or mustard sauce, and you ate them with your fingers, laying each one flat on a cracker and biting straight through. The salt hit first, then the oily richness, then the hot sauce burning at the back of your throat. Old men ate sardines on the porch in summer. Widows ate them at the kitchen table with the radio playing low. It was the meal nobody ever photographed and nobody bragged about, but it kept people fed and steady on the days when turning on the stove felt like too much to ask of yourself. If sardines were what you reached for when you had no energy, lima beans with a smoked ham hock were what you made when you had all day and nowhere to be. Dried limas, called butter beans across the deep south, cost pennies a pound and stretched across several days of eating. You soaked them overnight, then set them on the stove the next morning with a ham hock, a quartered onion, and enough water to cover everything by 2 inches. They simmered for hours, the kitchen growing thick with smoky sweetness. The hock fell apart slowly, its meat shredding into the broth, while the beans swelled creamy inside their skins. By the 1950s, families leaving the rural South carried this recipe north to Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, where a pot of butter beans on a cold January evening could make a strange apartment feel like the kitchen back home. One pot lasted a widow 4 days, over rice, with cornbread, or just plain from the bowl when it was almost gone. In the dead heat of a southern summer, when garden tomatoes split on the vine from ripeness, nothing in the world tasted better than a tomato sandwich. 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick layer of Duke's mayonnaise, never Miracle Whip, never Hellmann's in certain households, fat slices of tomatoes still warm from the afternoon sun, salt, and black pepper. Duke's, first produced in Greenville, South Carolina in 1917, became the standard across black Southern kitchens because it was tangier than the competition, with no added sugar cutting the richness. The tomato sandwich was strictly seasonal, available only during those few weeks when everything aligned, and it carried a joy that could not be rushed or replicated in winter. Seniors who grew up tending gardens talk about these sandwiches the way other people talk about holiday feasts. You ate one standing at the counter, juice running down your wrist, and for just a minute the whole summer opened up around you, and you were small again in your mother's kitchen, reaching for the salt. The sound of a knife scraping down a cob of corn opened the whole ritual, and if you grew up in a black Southern kitchen, you knew the difference between cutting corn and scraping it. Cutting gave you kernels. Scraping gave you the milk, the starchy, sweet liquid trapped inside, and that milk was everything. You held the cob upright over a bowl and ran the back of the knife down hard, pressing out every drop of pulp and juice. Then it all went into a hot skillet with butter, bacon grease, salt, and pepper. It thickened as the starch released, becoming something between cream corn and savory pudding. This technique has roots in both indigenous and West African cooking traditions, where corn was worked for maximum yield. By the 1960s, as frozen and canned corn edged out fresh ears, scratch-fried corn started slipping off weeknight tables. The women who still make it can judge the ripeness by pressing a thumbnail into a single kernel, and they learned that by watching, never from reading. Pinto beans and cornbread carried black families and Appalachian families through every hard decade from the Depression to the 70s. Dried pintos cost pennies a pound. Cornmeal never ran out. You soaked the beans overnight, set them on the back burner with a ham bone or salt pork, and let them go all day while you handled everything else. The house filled with smoke and earth, and something faintly sweet under the salt. By evening, the beans had turned thick, their broth dark from hours with the pork. The cornbread went into a cast iron skillet greased with bacon drippings and baked until the bottom crust was nearly black. And that crust was the prize, the part you broke off first and ate standing at the stove. Monday was traditionally bean day in many black Southern homes because wash day consumed the morning and the beans needed no supervision. For someone cooking alone, one pot meant a week of suppers, reheated each night and the flavor only deepened. That same skillet never fully cooled before it was making hamburger steak, a seasoned ground beef patty smothered in onion gravy that answered the question of what to cook when money was short and energy shorter. You mix ground beef with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and Worcestershire, shaped thick patties, and seared them hard until the crust turned almost black. Then the gravy built itself right there in the pan, sliced onions wilting in the drippings, a handful of flour stirred until it browned, broth poured in slow while you scraped up every bit of foam stuck to the iron. The patties went back in to simmer until they were tender enough to cut with a spoon. Over rice or beside a piece of bread, this was what widows and widowers cooked when a full Sunday dinner felt like too much effort, but a frozen tray felt like surrender. One patty, one plate, one chair, it still tasted like somebody in the kitchen loved you. Smothered cabbage cost almost nothing and lasted for days, which is exactly why it appeared every time the month outlasted the money. A whole head was one of the cheapest things at any grocery, and even through the lean winters of the 1940s and 50s, cabbage never left the shelf. You fried a few strips of bacon until crisp, pulled them out, and into that rendered fat went the entire head, chopped rough, a sliced onion, a heavy shake of seasoned salt. Lid on, heat low, wait. The cabbage collapsed into itself over the next hour, turning from raw green to soft amber, absorbing the bacon fat until every strand was slick and yielding. Some added a splash of vinegar at the end. Others crumbled the bacon back through. The beauty of it for someone living alone was that smothered cabbage demanded nothing from you except patience. And patience was the one thing you had more of now than you ever wanted. The cheapest meat in the case fed you the longest, and that was the logic behind chicken backs and rice. Before boneless breasts conquered the grocery store, she bought a package of backs, mostly bone, some skin, scraps of dark meat, and more flavor than anything else in the case. She seasoned them by hand with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and paprika, then laid them across a baking pan with raw rice underneath. Broth poured in, foil pressed tight, and the oven did the rest. The fat rendered straight down into the rice, turning each grain rich and golden. The meat fell off in small pieces you ate with your fingers, standing at the counter. Through the 1950s and 60s, chicken backs were a weeknight staple where a whole bird was saved for Sunday. A senior alone could stretch one pan across 3 meals, and nobody at the grocery even stocked backs anymore. That was the quiet way things disappeared, not with a fuss, but with an empty space where they used to be. Where collard greens got the fame, mustard greens did the quiet, steady work. Sharper and more bitter, with a peppery bite collards never carried, mustard greens were what people who truly knew their greens reached for. They cooked faster, done in under 2 hours with a smoked turkey neck or salt pork. No need for a long afternoon simmer. The insider marker, though, was the pepper vinegar, a bottle of small hot peppers steeped in white vinegar that sat on the table in nearly every black Southern household from the 1930s forward. You shook it over the greens right before eating, and the sharp acid sliced through the richness of the pork fat. Making pepper vinegar was its own ritual. You packed a clean bottle with peppers, filled it with vinegar, and waited 2 weeks. Nobody bought it at a store. You inherited the bottle, refilled it, passed it down. When the woman who kept it died, the vinegar went with her, and nobody ever got the taste exactly right again. She set the plate down with a firmness that meant you were going to eat it. Liver and onions smothered in gravy was the most divisive meal in any black household. Kids ran from it, elders swore by it. Sliced thin, dredged in seasoned flour, and pan-fried, until the outside crisped while the inside stayed pink. Beef liver was iron-rich, cheap, and at every butcher counter through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. The onions went in after, thick rings softening in the drippings until they turned sweet and translucent. Then the gravy, built from flour and broth in the same pan. Everything came back together under a lid to simmer. The taste was mineral and deep, balanced by the sweetness of the onions and the salt of the gravy. Seniors who still cook it eat alone now because nobody younger will touch it. The skillet is the same one their mothers used. The recipe never changed, only the number of plates did. Beef tips and rice asked for patience and in return gave you something that tasted like it took all day because it did. You started with the cheapest stew meat, usually chuck cut into cubes or trimmed at home from whatever tough cut was on sale. The meat got seared in a hot pot until dark brown on every side, then pulled out while you built the base. Onions, celery, garlic, a bay leaf, flour made a roux, broth went in, and the beef returned to simmer low for hours until each piece fell apart at the touch of a fork. The gravy thickened, dark and glossy. Over white rice, this was the kind of meal that made a small kitchen feel like a real home. In the 1950s and 60s, beef tips were a common Sunday alternative to chicken, and households watching every dollar. A senior alone could stretch one pot across 3 evenings, and the last bowl was always the richest. And then there were the nights when patience had nothing to do with it. Vienna sausages, straight from the tin, eaten standing at the counter with a fork. Not heated, not plated, just opened and consumed one by one, dipped in mustard or hot sauce or nothing at all. This was the meal behind the meal, the one nobody mentioned at church or described to the grandchildren. The small, pale sausages packed in broth cost almost nothing and lasted forever on the shelf. The taste was salty and faintly smoky, and the texture was something you either grew up with or you didn't. Kids ate them after school. Night workers ate them at midnight. Widows ate them standing up because sitting at the table alone with a proper plate somehow felt worse than eating from the can. It was honest. Nobody pretended it was cooking, but it was food and it was there. And on certain evenings, that was the whole and only point. Stewed chicken, wings, and potatoes in one pot happened when the grocery budget said wings and the pantry said potatoes, and that was the end of the conversation. You season the wings with salt, pepper, paprika, and a little cayenne. Brown them in oil in the bottom of a heavy pot. In went quartered potatoes, diced onion, garlic, and enough broth to come halfway up. Lid on, heat low, walk away. In an hour, the wings had surrendered all their fat and flavor into the liquid. The potatoes had absorbed it and turned golden at the edges, and the whole apartment smelled like someone had been working in the kitchen since noon. This was a 1960s weeknight dish in homes where the cook fed everyone else first and ate last. A woman eating alone decades later still made enough for 3 evenings because cooking a small amount felt wrong. The pot was too big, the habit too deep, the silence easier to bear when at least the stove was working. If you never ate crackling bread, you never fully understood what Black Southern cooks meant when they said nothing goes to waste. Cracklings, the crispy, rendered pieces of pork skin and fat left after making lard, were folded straight into cornbread batter before it hit the cast iron skillet. The result was dense, salty, faintly greasy, and impossible to stop eating. The cracklings softened just enough inside the batter to turn chewy, while the cornbread crisped around them. This connects to West African fat rendering techniques that enslaved Africans brought to the South, where every part of the hog was claimed. Through the 1930s and 40s, Hog killing season in rural black communities produced cracklings by the bucket, and crackling bread was among the first things baked. By the 70s, as store-bought lard replaced home rendering, cracklings grew scarce. The seniors who still remember the taste describe it the way you describe a place you loved and can never return to. There was a specific sadness in roasting a whole hen for one person, and every senior who did it knew the feeling without naming it. A baked hen with cornbread dressing was a holiday meal scaled down to a single place setting. The same seasonings, the same technique, dressing made from crumbled cornbread, celery, onion, sage, and broth, but fitted around a small hen instead of a 20-pound turkey. She rubbed the bird with butter and seasoned salt, tucked it into the roasting pan she had used for 40 years, and let the oven fill the house with a smell that used to bring everyone running. The dressing baked alongside, catching the drippings. When it was done, she sat at her usual seat with the other chairs pushed in. Leftovers lasted nearly a week. Hen on bread, dressing reheated, broth saved. Too much food for one. She made it anyway because giving up the ritual would mean admitting how much had changed. After World War II, when Spam had fed soldiers across the Pacific and came home with them by the millions of cans, it found a quiet second life in black kitchens as the protein you could fry in 3 minutes. Sliced thick, laid in a hot skillet, the slabs sizzled until the edges browned and crisped while the center stayed salty and soft. Scrambled eggs went alongside, cooked in the same grease, seasoned with nothing but salt and pepper. This was not a meal anyone recorded in a recipe box. It happened at 7 in the morning or 10 at night, whenever hunger arrived and the pantry held nothing fresh. Spam cost under $1 a can well into the 1970s and needed no refrigeration until open. For seniors alone, it was dependable the way fresh meat never could be. Always there, always ready, in the time it took the skillet to get hot. Some people called it desperate. The people who ate it called it Tuesday. Butter beans cooked down with cured ham moved so slowly on the stove you could start them after breakfast and not check the pot again until the light shifted in the kitchen. The large, flat-dried limas that people in the Deep South refused to call anything but butter beans were soaked overnight, then simmered the next day with a thick slice of country ham, a halved onion, and water to cover. The ham gave up its salt and smoke gradually, and the beans absorbed every trace as they softened. By afternoon, the broth had thickened into something close to gravy, and the beans dissolved on your tongue. This was a 1940s and 50s rural meal that traveled north with the migration. The women who still make it know the rule: never add salt until the very end, because the ham does everything. One pot fed a family for days. For someone cooking alone, it fed her for a week, and the slow morning of preparation gave her a reason to move through the kitchen the way she used to. Salmon over grits was breakfast for the mornings when you woke up missing someone and needed a stove to keep your hands busy. Leftover canned salmon, flaked with a fork, warmed in a skillet with butter and black pepper, spooned over a bowl of slow-cooked grits, stone ground, the kind that took 30 minutes and required stirring every few to keep from sticking. You added butter and salt, and the grits turned thick and creamy, a perfect bed for the warm fish. Along the coasts of South Carolina and Georgia, fish over grits had been a gula geechee tradition for generations, with the catch changing by the morning. Inland, canned salmon substituted, cheap, always available, and shelf-stable. For a senior alone, salmon and grits took just long enough to prepare that the kitchen felt occupied again, the stove warm, the morning shaped by something other than silence. Stewed prunes and buttered toast might sound plain to someone who never ate them, but in Black households through the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, this was how a gentle morning started. Dried prunes, simmered in water with a little sugar, and sometimes a strip of lemon peel until they swelled soft, their liquid darkening into sweet syrup. The toast came from whatever was on the counter: white bread, a leftover biscuit split and crisped, spread thick with butter while still hot enough to melt it. You ate the prunes with a spoon and the toast between bites, and the warmth of it settled you. Doctors through the 1950s recommended prunes for older patients, and elders needed no convincing. They had been eating them that way since childhood. But beyond the practical, there was something about the small pot on the stove, the smell of warm fruit, the quiet toast that made a morning feel tended to, even when no one else was in the house to notice. Smothered turkey wings came from the same kitchen logic that governed everything on this list. Take the cheapest cut, season it hard, cook it slow, and turn it into something people fought over at the church supper. Turkey wings were bigger than chicken, sold for almost nothing because nobody with money wanted them, and they opened up beautifully under slow heat. You season heavy, salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, cayenne, seared them until the skin browned and tightened, then transferred them to a roasting pan with sliced onions and a gravy made from pan drippings, flour, and broth. Foil on, oven low, 2 hours. The meat fell from the bone into a thick, dark sauce that demanded rice underneath. Through the 1960s and 70s, smothered turkey wings anchored church dinners across the South and in the northern cities where congregations had relocated. Bringing one pan home meant eating well for days. Making them alone meant the kitchen still smelled like Sunday. A fried bologna sandwich needed exactly 4 things: thick-cut bologna, a skillet, white bread, and yellow mustard, and it held more weight in Black working-class memory than dishes 5 times its price. You scored the edges of the slice with a knife so it wouldn't curl, laid it in a dry skillet, and let it brown in its own fat until the edges crisped and the center puffed. 2 slices of soft bread, a line of mustard on each, the hot bologna pressed between. During the 1950s and 60s, a pound of bologna cost under 40 cents, making it among the cheapest meats in any store. Kids carried these sandwiches to school in paper sacks. Men ate them on job sites. Seniors fried a single slice whenever the craving hit, morning or night, because it was fast and warm and tasted exactly like the lunch their mother packed them half a century ago. Some evenings, the refrigerator held nothing but leftover gravy from 2 nights before and cold rice on the back of the stove, and that became supper. Rice and gravy warm for one. You scooped rice into a bowl, ladled on whatever gravy remained, brown from Hamburger steak, white from breakfast sausage, dark drippings from a roast already gone, and heated it together until the rice softened and absorbed the sauce. This was the meal at the bottom of the week when everything before it had been eaten and payday was still days away. It was not a recipe, it was a condition, and yet it tasted like comfort because the gravy remembered what it came from and the rice held it the way a body holds warmth. Women who grew up during the Depression never wasted gravy. They saved it in jars and cups in bowls covered with saucers. Throwing it out was the same as throwing out the labor. When she warmed the bowl at dusk, she was eating everything she had ever made, condensed into one last serving. A sweet potato wrapped in foil and baked slow needed no explanation and no company. You washed it, poked holes with a fork, wrapped it tight, and set it on the oven rack for an hour. The skin darkened and pulled away, and when you split it open, the inside was deep orange, steaming, almost too sweet to need the butter you pressed in anyway. Sweet potatoes trace their place in black cooking to the yams of West Africa, different plants, but carrying the same weight at the center of the table. Through the 1940s and 50s, one large sweet potato cost a few pennies, and a single one was enough for supper. For a person eating alone, it was complete, warm, filling, soft enough that teeth barely mattered. She ate it from the foil with a spoon, sitting by the window where the evening light came in, and it was the quietest meal on earth. The oatmeal was never instant. That was the line between the generations. She made it on the stove, slow, with water and a pinch of salt, stirring with a wooden spoon while the kitchen lightened around her. When it thickened, she spooned it into a bowl, pressed a hollow in the center, and dropped in a pat of butter and a spoonful of brown sugar. The butter melted into a small golden pool. The sugar dissolved dark and syrupy at the edges. That was breakfast. Every morning. Same bowl, same chair, same spoon. In the 1940s and 50s, a canister of rolled oats lasted weeks and cost almost nothing. The cheapest hot breakfast in America. For a woman who once rose at 5 to feed a husband and 4 kids before school, the oatmeal was the one ritual that survived the emptying of the house. The kitchen shrank, the table cleared, the mornings grew long and still, but the oatmeal was there, warm and stirred the same way, and the spoon still fit her hand. Hogshead cheese made outsiders flinch and insiders reach for the crackers. Made from the meat of a hog's head, cheeks, snout, ears, tongue, simmered until everything fell apart, then seasoned with vinegar, hot sauce, salt and pepper, packed into a mold and chilled until the natural gelatin set it firm. You sliced it cold and thin, laid it on a saltine, sometimes with a dot of hot sauce. The texture was dense and slightly jiggly, the taste porky and sharp. This practice of claiming every part of the animal connects to both West African and European preservation traditions that enslaved people continued out of necessity and kept out of preference. Through the 1930s and 40s, hog killing time in rural black communities meant hogshead cheese made in batches and shared among neighbors. By the 80s, it had faded from most kitchens. The seniors who still ate it made it alone because the grandchildren refused it, and the neighbors who once brought theirs over for comparison were gone. Canned peaches over pound cake was what happened when baking for one person stopped making sense. There was a time when she made cobbler from scratch, rolled the crust, sliced the fruit, sugared it, watched it bubble while the house filled with cinnamon. But cobbler fed 8. It was made for a table crowded with people reaching in. When the table emptied, the cobbler stopped. So she bought a Sara Lee pound cake, sliced it thin, and opened a can of peaches. The syrup softened the cake. The peaches were sweet and yielding. It was not the same, and she knew it, but it was close enough to the memory of having made something real for people who loved what she made. She ate it in the living room now, not the kitchen, because the kitchen table had too many empty chairs. In the end, the last comfort food was the first one. A cup of coffee and a biscuit at the same table where she once fed everyone she loved. The coffee was strong, made in a percolator or a drip machine with sugar and a little milk the way she always took it. The biscuit she made from memory, flour, baking powder, salt, a little lard, buttermilk added until the dough felt right. She never measured. She never had to. It came out golden and split open with warm steam, and she ate it slow with her coffee while the morning was still new. The big pots sat on the top shelf. The chairs were pushed in, but her hands moved through the flour the way they always had, and the biscuit tasted the way it always tasted. And for the few minutes it took to eat, the table felt less large. That was enough. Some mornings, that had to be enough. Fried bologna with white bread, was a 10-cent dinner that showed up on tables across every black neighborhood in the 1960s and 70s. Not because anyone planned it, but because the refrigerator was low and the energy was lower. A thick slice of Oscar Mayer or store-brand bologna went into a dry skillet over medium heat. Without those slits, 2 cuts like a cross, the meat would dome up in the center and burn at the edges. Done right, the bologna curled slightly, browned in spots, and developed a salty crust that no fancy charcuterie could match. Laid on soft white bread with yellow mustard or a smear of mayonnaise, it was dinner in 4 minutes. Some added a slice of American cheese, others put hot sauce on the bread first, and the old folks who ate it alone at night, they didn't need sides. Just a sandwich, a glass of sweet tea, and the television on low. Butter beans with ham hock turned humble ingredients into something that tasted like slow Sunday afternoons. Dried butter beans soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with a smoked ham hock until the beans turned creamy and the meat fell off the bone. The broth became silky, flavored with onion, garlic, bay leaf, and black pepper. For seniors cooking alone, this dish was practical. 1 pot, minimal preparation, and enough food for several days. The ham hock cost little but delivered tremendous flavor, infusing every bean with smoky depth. The beans provided protein and fiber, making this a complete meal. Served over rice or with cornbread, butter beans with ham hock proved that patience and simple ingredients could warm both body and spirit.
Molasses milk was one of those simple breakfast drinks that could fill an empty stomach and give strength to start the day without costing much. A mug of warm milk would be stirred with a generous spoon of blackstrap molasses until it turned dark, thick, and sweet, creating a drink unlike anything else. For families without access to expensive sugar, molasses was a cheaper and more nutritious option, packed with iron, calcium, and minerals that were badly needed in homes stretched thin. Children often drank it before school, while adults relied on it as a quick energy boost before heading to work in fields, factories, or other labor. It was easy to prepare, affordable, and comforting on cold mornings when heavier meals were not always possible or practical. The taste was bold, with a deep sweetness that lingered, giving a sense of fullness and warmth that plain milk never offered. It was more than a drink. It was a way of stretching resources while caring for a family's needs with love and creativity. Today, it has disappeared from most tables, but it once stood proudly as a daily ritual of comfort.
Tomato sandwiches with mayonnaise only appeared when the garden came in. That short window in July and August when the tomatoes were heavy, warm from the vine, and red all the way through. This was never a winter meal. The tomato had to be sliced thick, almost 1/4 inch, laid on soft white bread, spread with Duke's mayonnaise. Always Duke's in the South, where brand loyalty ran deeper than politics. Salt and black pepper on top, nothing else. The bread soaked through from the juice within seconds, and you ate it fast, leaning over the plate so it didn't drip down your wrist. For seniors who still kept a small garden or had a neighbor who brought tomatoes by, this sandwich was the taste of summer itself. No cooking, no heat from the stove, and a sweetness from the fruit that made the meal feel like a gift. Once the season passed, it was gone, and waiting for it to come back was part of what made it matter. A half pound of ground beef could become a full dinner if you knew what to do with the grease left behind. Rice and tomato gravy could be made from pantry staples alone, requiring nothing fresh except maybe an onion from the counter. A can of tomatoes, flour, fat, and seasonings transformed into thick, tangy gravy poured over fluffy white rice. The gravy started with browning flour in oil or bacon drippings until golden, then adding crushed tomatoes, water, salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of sugar to balance the acid. It simmered until thick and rich. For seniors watching budgets, this dish cost almost nothing, yet delivered warmth in every bite. The rice stretched the meal further, and leftovers reheated beautifully. It was simple food that never pretended otherwise, just honest, filling, and deeply rooted in making do with what the cupboard held.
Cathead biscuits with cane syrup earned their playful name from their impressive size, each biscuit as big as a cat's head. The dough was mixed by hand, using flour, lard, and buttermilk to create a texture both fluffy and sturdy enough to split and fill. Baked until golden brown, they emerged from the oven towering and fragrant. Grandparents remember serving them with thick drizzles of dark cane syrup or honey, a combination that balanced sweet and savory with every bite. These giant biscuits were a centerpiece of country breakfasts, capable of holding slices of fried ham or scrambled eggs without falling apart. Families loved how a single biscuit could satisfy even the hungriest farmhand, making them practical as well as indulgent. Their name sparked laughter and curiosity, ensuring they were always a conversation starter at the table. Today, the memory of cathead biscuits remains a warm reminder of big flavors, generous hearts, and mornings filled with the smell of baking bread.
When the grocery money ran out 3 days before the check came, eggs and rice with tomato gravy kept the lights on inside the body. This was Depression-era arithmetic carried through generations of black kitchens. A dozen eggs for 30 cents in the 1940s, a cup of rice from a bulk sack, and a can of tomatoes that stretched across 2 meals. Rice cooked plain, eggs scrambled soft in a skillet with butter or bacon grease, pulled off the heat while still wet so they wouldn't turn rubbery. The tomato gravy came together in the same pan. Canned tomatoes crushed by hand, a little sugar to cut the acid, salt, and a spoonful of flour to thicken it. Everything went into one bowl. Eggs on rice, gravy over both. And for a few minutes, the kitchen smelled like someone was taking care of you, even if that someone was yourself. The old ones could tell by the color of the gravy whether it had been made with love or just made to get through. Nobody talked about this one at the family reunion, but everyone knew. Cornmeal mush was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, depending on how you served it, proof that one ingredient could stretch across an entire day. Cooked fresh in the morning, it became hot porridge drizzled with molasses or butter. Poured into a pan and chilled, it could be sliced and fried until crispy outside and creamy within. The recipe required only cornmeal, water, salt, and patience, stirring constantly while the mixture thickened into golden comfort. For seniors living alone, cornmeal mush was economical and versatile. A bag of cornmeal lasted weeks and cost mere dollars. The dish could be dressed with syrup, cheese, gravy, or simply more butter. It carried memories of childhood breakfasts and lean times transformed into something satisfying.
Sweet potato biscuits added a gentle sweetness to the morning, making them a treasured treat for families across the South. Mashed sweet potatoes were folded into soft dough along with a spoonful of cane syrup and a touch of warm spices. As the biscuits baked, the natural sugars caramelized, creating a golden crust and a tender, moist interior. Served warm with butter or a smear of homemade jam, they filled kitchens with a scent that promised a comforting start to the day. Grandparents often saved leftover sweet potatoes from supper just to make these biscuits at dawn, stretching every ingredient while creating something that felt indulgent. Their vibrant color and subtle sweetness brightened even the simplest breakfast plates, pairing well with scrambled eggs or strong black coffee. These biscuits were a perfect example of resourceful cooking that turned farm harvests into something both nourishing and memorable, leaving a flavor that still lingers in family stories and worn recipe cards.
A tin key, a slow peel of metal, and the sharp smell of oil and salt, sardines and crackers with hot sauce needed no stove and no explanation. In black households across the South, a can of sardines was a full meal eaten standing at the counter or sitting by the window with a sleeve of saltines and a bottle of Louisiana or Crystal. They came packed in mustard sauce, tomato sauce, or plain oil, and every person had their preference, argued about with the same conviction as church denominations. You ate them one at a time, laid across a cracker, dotted with hot sauce, followed by a sip of something cold. During the 1950s and 60s, a tin cost 10 or 15 cents, making it one of the cheapest proteins on the shelf. For elderly folks living alone, sardines were dinner on nights when cooking felt like too much and the body just needed fuel. No pan to wash, no grease to cool, just a tin, a knife, and the quiet rhythm of feeding yourself when nobody else was coming to the table. If you didn't cut slits in the bologna before it hit the skillet, you weren't from the right kitchen. Smothered cabbage was a weeknight staple that stretched pennies into plates full of comfort and warmth. A single head of cabbage could feed someone for days when sliced thin and cooked low with onions, bacon grease, and simple seasonings like salt, pepper, and a splash of vinegar. The cabbage softened and sweetened as it braised, absorbing smoky richness from whatever seasoning meat was on hand. Seniors living alone found this dish perfect because it required minimal effort, just time on the stove while flavors melded together. The pot could be reheated throughout the week, tasting better each day. Served with cornbread for sopping up the juices, smothered cabbage provided fiber, vitamins, and soul-deep satisfaction that reminded you of family kitchens passing.
Molasses oatmeal filled kitchens with the deep aroma of blackstrap sweetness, offering an iron-rich start that was both frugal and indulgent. Old-fashioned oats simmered slowly in milk or water until creamy, then received a generous spoonful of thick sorghum or blackstrap molasses. The dark syrup melted into the oats, tinting them a warm brown and adding a flavor both smoky and sweet. Many families used molasses not only for its taste, but also for its mineral strength, a natural source of iron and energy. Some sprinkled chopped nuts or sliced bananas on top for extra texture, while others added a pinch of cinnamon for gentle spice. Molasses oatmeal spoke to a time when nourishment and economy were equally important, turning a humble grain into a breakfast that felt rich and sustaining. It remained a quiet favorite of African American households, a reminder that even the simplest bowls could carry history, health, and the comforting weight of tradition with every spoonful.
Those kitchens fed generations. Share this and tell us which dish still lives in yours.